What's the worst rich kid disaster you've ever seen that cost their family everything? Story 1. I was the junior accountant nobody noticed at a luxury car dealership owned by the Cavendish family. Think polo photos and a last name on a hospital wing. My job was reconciling floor plan financing, the short-term loans dealers use to buy inventory. One afternoon, I get an email from our summer intern, a kid from community college, asking why we were making interest payments on VINs that didn't exist. I almost blew him off. Then he attached a spreadsheet cross-referencing state title records with our list. 47 cars had never been titled. Ghost inventory. I brought it to the CFO, who happened to be the owner's brother-in-law. He smiled too hard, asked me to leave it, and CC'd legal. By morning, my network access was revoked, and the intern's badge didn't work. That's when the intern posted his spreadsheet on his school's subreddit asking, "Is this fraud?" It was up for 10 minutes, long enough for a local journalist to screenshot it. The article hit on a Friday. By Monday, the floor plan lender did a surprise audit. The numbers matched the spreadsheet. The CFO resigned for health reasons. The owner showed up red-eyed, still insisting it was a clerical error. Then the FBI walked through the glass doors with windbreakers and polite smiles. Turns out the CFO had been kiting loans by reusing VINs from totaled cars and moving funds through shell vendors that, detailing, never hired. The kicker: the shell companies were in his wife's maiden name. When the bank called its loans, the Cavendishes tried to plug the hole by liquidating a construction company they also owned. That's when subcontractors came forward about unpaid retainage. In 2 months, the charity gala invitations stopped, and the hospital wing sign quietly came down. The family home went to auction. Even the polo ponies got consigned. But the real twist came during the bankruptcy creditors' meeting. The intern stood up. He was the founder's illegitimate grandson, the result of a long-ago affair with a receptionist. He'd applied for the internship using his mother's name. "I just wanted to see how you ran things," he said. He didn't just expose them. He inherited the whistleblower reward. The richest family in town lost everything to a kid they refused to acknowledge. A story 2. I was 11 when the judge asked whether I wanted to live with mom or dad. We were in a family courtroom with beige carpeting and the smell of old coffee. Dad wore a suit that probably cost more than our old apartment. Mom wore the same black dress she wore to interviews. His side of the room had a phalanx of lawyers. Mom had a legal aid attorney with a yellow highlighter and a steady voice. Dad's argument was that I needed stability. Translation: the driver, the house with the pool, and the private school whose headmaster suddenly started emailing me directly. Mom's argument was that I needed to be believed. Translation: the bruise on my arm wasn't from soccer. There was a trust fund in my name, but Dad controlled it till I was 18. The trust's corporate trustee sent letters about fiduciary duty. Mom sent me notes in my lunchbox that said, "You are not what he says." I said "Mom" into the microphone. Dad didn't look at me. He stared at the judge like he could buy time. The twist wasn't the custody ruling. It went to Mom. It was the trust. Buried in the documents was a clause Dad's father had insisted on. If a court found domestic misconduct involving the beneficiary, distributions halted and control shifted to the successor trustee, my great-aunt, who hated Dad's temper more than she loved money. Mom's lawyer had asked for a finding, not just a custody ruling. When the judge granted it, the trustee froze all of Dad's discretionary draws because they'd been for my benefit. Goodbye driver, goodbye pool, goodbye company-backed mortgage. The board of Dad's firm had tolerated his tantrums for years because he closed deals. Suddenly, he was a PR liability who couldn't paper his own lifestyle. The partners voted him out, citing the morals clause he'd added for other people. We moved into a small place with creaky floors and peace. Dad sold his watches, then the car, then the house at a loss. The last time I saw him, he was wearing an off-the-rack suit and asking if I could reconsider so the trustee would unfreeze distributions. I was 13. "You taught me contracts matter," I said. He lost his temper in the hallway, right in front of the court officer's body cam. That video became Exhibit A for the appeal. He didn't just lose me. He lost the only faucet he ever knew how to turn. Story 3. I was the wedding photographer, second shooter actually, hired by the mother of the groom because I knew how to make people look aspirational. The venue was an estate that used to be a monastery. The champagne had names longer than my lease. The bride was kind, all nerves and sincerity. The groom was 4 credit cards and a smile. About 20 minutes before speeches, the AV guy begged me to dump my photos onto a shared drive for the slideshow. He was behind. I dragged a folder. He dragged it into the deck. No one checked the contents because no one checks anything when the string quartet is playing a Dua Lipa cover. Halfway through the slideshow, after the baby pictures and college shots, A burst of vertical photos appeared. The room laughed because vertical is funny at a wedding. Then people stopped laughing. The groom was in a mirror selfie, shirtless, with a woman who was not the bride. Then another, and another. Hotel room timestamps from 3 weeks earlier. The iPhone live photo audio was still on. He was whispering the bride's name to the other woman. The mother of the groom gasped like a kettle. Chaos isn't loud at first. It's quiet as people decide which way to run. The bride stood so slowly it broke my heart, walked to the podium and tapped the mic. She thanked everyone for coming. She said the party could continue without her. Then, this is the part that felt like a movie, she pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to the officiant, who turned out to be not just a family friend but also her lawyer. Prenup. Infidelity clause. Contingent upon evidence of marital misconduct prior to solemnization, it read, with a definition attached. The slideshow had just provided it in 4K. By Monday, the prenup converted to a postnup with a forfeiture of his claim to her startup shares. His parents had mortgaged their house to buy his stake in a retail concept he kept promising would disrupt socks. Without her money, the venture collapsed. Vendors demanded payment. The bride's lawyer forwarded the prenup clause to each. The groom's father wept in our edit bay as I delivered the footage, because the slideshow wasn't the mistake. Plugging his son into their credit line was. The family lost the house. The bride? She DM'd me later asking for the original files. Evidence, she wrote, then added a heart. She sent me a referral the next week for a promotion shoot. She'd kept the venue deposit and launched an events brand. A story 4. Our neighborhood church sits on a hill, and the Vandermeers filled it to the rafters for Mr. V's funeral. He'd built half the apartment towers downtown. His kids called him the Lion. There were floral tributes shaped like cranes. I live-streamed the service for the neighborhood Facebook group because Mrs. V asked for community, the eulogies, the montage, the hymn. It all glowed with tasteful grief. Then came the reading of the will. I'd never seen one done publicly, but the family insisted it be transparent. The attorney cleared his throat and began. Standard stuff. Charitable bequests. The scholarship in his name. Then he said, and to my daughter, Elena. The pews murmured. Everyone knew the Vandermeers had 2 sons. The camera comments exploded. The attorney carried on, unbothered, listing an irrevocable trust fully funded with what sounded like everything. The big house, the voting shares, the art. To Elena. From the back of the church, a woman stood, holding the hand of a teenage girl with Mr. V's exact smile. The widow closed her eyes. The elder son, our HOA president, started to rise, then sat when the attorney raised a palm. The trust had been executed a year earlier. DNA test attached. The condition. The trust vested upon acknowledgement at the funeral. He had planned it like a business deal. There would be no backroom denial, no, she's mistaken. The acknowledgement was live, on camera, with the entire town watching. The sons tried to challenge then and there, shouting about undue influence. The attorney read the no contest clause. If they fought and lost, they forfeited their specific bequests, vacation homes and petty cash compared to the main assets. The widow walked to the woman, reached out, and whispered something the mic didn't catch. She guided them to the front pew. The comments went from popcorn emojis to prayer hands. Within months, the banks replaced the sons on the company board. Lenders like dependability, not dramatics. The elder son sold his Audi and moved into one of the old rental units his dad had kept out of sentiment. The HOA presidency went uncontested the next year because he'd been evicted for non-payment of dues. The twist? The widow became the trustee for Elena until she turned 25. She'd known for years. Mr. V had told her the night after their anniversary. Family, he said, means everyone. The richest kids in our neighborhood lost everything because their father finally gave it to the daughter he'd hidden in plain sight. And their mother made sure it stayed that way. Story 5. I tend bar in a lake town that turns into a catalog every summer. The Harts were our seasonal royalty. Big glass house on the ridge, boat that looked like a Bond villain's commute. Mr. Hart made his money in resources, which around here means gravel pits and political donations. He hated the new environmental regs and loved telling me which council member he'd educated over bourbon. Then came the drought and the sinkholes. The old-timers warned him the ridge was karst, Swiss cheese limestone. He wanted an infinity pool hanging over the cliff. His contractor balked. Hart threatened to blacklist him and found a guy who said, "Sure, boss." They poured concrete over voids and pretended compacted fill was bedrock. Everyone posted Dieter summer vibes from that pool. His teenage son did a drone flyover with a caption, "Gravity is for the poor." One late August evening, the lake dropped another foot. I was closing when I heard what I thought was thunder. The ridge groaned. The Hart place folded like a postcard. The pool sheared off and slid into a new hole the size of a grocery store. No one died. Miracle. But the house was condemned. Insurance sent engineers who used words like known subsidence risk and material misrepresentation. Claim denied. The bank called the note. That would have been ruin enough, but karma had a ledger. The contractor Hart bullied produced texts where Hart insisted on value engineering the soil work. The county posted the investigation online. A local geologist stitched it into a TikTok explaining how cutting corners created the perfect collapse. 10 million views. The lenders for his other projects fled. His personal guarantees kicked in. The boat disappeared. So did Mrs. Hart's Instagram. A month later, his son came into my bar with a backpack and asked for water. He'd been flamed into oblivion at school. Someone made shirts with his caption. He said he was moving in with his mom's sister. My dad says it's all politics, he mumbled. I slid him a sandwich and, on impulse, my spare apron. The twist? He came back the next day asking if the dishwashing job was still open. The richest family in town lost everything, and the kid who once mocked gravity learned how tips work. He never looked back. His father still does. Down the hole where his house used to be. Story 6. I was the rich kid's freshman roommate by lottery, not legacy. He arrived with monogrammed luggage and a new Mac still in the shrink wrap. I arrived with a refurbished ThinkPad and a scholarship contingent on a 3.8 GPA. He liked to joke he'd majored in admissions because his dad had a naming opportunity pending. Our dorm already had the family crest over the fireplace, just waiting for a plaque. The kid never went to class. He outsourced everything to a consultant who ran drafts through Google Docs under my nose like I was furniture. Every time I tried to say something, he'd wave me off. Relax. My dad pays tuition for 5 kids here. That includes you, indirectly. Midterms, the consultant sent me a doc by mistake. It still had tracked changes from a ghostwriter in another time zone and a wire transfer memo in the footer. I didn't snitch. I just closed my laptop and studied for my own calc exam. A week later, he locked me out of our shared mini-fridge because I wouldn't collab on an ethics take-home. When I said no, he called me ungrateful. That word lodged like a pit in my throat. The blow-up came at the end-of-year banquet when the president announced the new Cavell Center for Innovation, his dad's name. The rich kid stood for applause like he'd defended a thesis. That night, our RA found me in the lab at 2 a.m., compiling a timeline. See, the university gives every student a private Git repo for programming assignments. His was a museum of plagiarism, pushes from 3 different IPs, file headers in Cyrillic, and commits timed to when he was live on Instagram 1,000 miles away at a Formula One race. I packaged it and sent it to the anonymous academic integrity portal. I figured they'd slap his wrist. Instead, the donor office tried to sit on it, until the consultant's other clients got flagged and one panicked parent emailed the wrong dean a spreadsheet with their kids' names and invoice amounts. That email was foiable because the dean had forwarded it to himself with the subject line, Crisis MGMT. Campus paper got it. The outrage wasn't about grades. It was about the building. Students marched. Faculty signed a letter. The university convened a special hearing, and for once it wasn't a formality. They rescinded his credits, asked the family to postpone the gift, and quietly disclosed to the Attorney General that development had conditioned consideration on admissions priorities. The AG opened an inquiry. Dad's company traded on reputation. Their biggest client had a morals clause. Overnight, their stock drifted like a boat with the plug out. The kid moved out before dawn, leaving a closet of unworn clothes and a note that said, "You ruined my life." The twist? 2 months later, I got a letter from the financial aid office. My scholarship, originally endowed by Anonymous, had been retitled by the estate of the founder who built the scholarship program 80 years ago. The founder's granddaughter had read the story, pulled her family's money from the Cavell Center, and re-endowed aid with a condition. Funds could never be leveraged for admissions influence. The plaque that finally went up over our fireplace wasn't his dad's name. It was a line from the new donor. "No one owes you a place." I hung the note he left me next to it like a trophy. Story 7. I was the executive assistant at a boutique investment firm where the founder's son became head of Web3 strategy after a gap year in Mykonos. He sat in his dad's glass-walled office, streaming market thoughts to an audience of day traders who called him Prince. Our compliance manual existed, but in the way a museum exists, worthy of reverence, never touched. My job was to herd signatures and mute the Slack channel when traders fought about avocado toast prices. One Friday, the kid went live from the conference room with the whiteboard behind him. It listed tickers for 3 pharmaceutical companies and a scribble. FDA decision Monday? Load calls. I froze. Those tickers matched an unreleased deck I'd scheduled for Monday's partner meeting, based on chatter our healthcare analyst was getting from a consultant. I DM'd him. End the stream. He sent me a sunglasses emoji. The live chat clipped the board, slowed it down, and posted it to Twitter with Pamir C through Alpha. By Sunday, it had 1 million views. Monday at 9:12 a.m., the SEC and DOJ walked in. Turns out our healthcare analyst's consultant was a doctor on an FDA advisory committee with a gambling problem. The Prince's live stream had broadcast the inside tip before we traded, but after we'd discussed it internally, enough to prove possession, the partners decided to throw the kid under the bus. They printed emails with subject lines like brainstorming and highlighted his emojis like confessions. He cried in a conference room the size of my studio apartment while his dad paced. Here's the thing. I had warned them. I'd logged every message asking the firm to disable cameras in sensitive areas. I'd sent a memo recommending a 24-hour blackout on social media from the office. The chief compliance officer replied, LOL. I printed that LOL. They fired me first, for insubordination, because I refused to wipe the whiteboard before the agents arrived. I walked out with a banker's box and my stomach in my throat. But an SEC lawyer called that night. They'd found my memos in the email review. We'd like to talk. I told them about the consultant, the side-channel chats on Signal, the Friday de-risking withdrawals wired to the founder's personal line of credit. The firm froze withdrawals. Investors showed up in the lobby with cameras. The partners settled, surrendered licenses, and watched their fund die in 30 days. The founder lost his Hamptons house to a clawback action. The SEC barred the kid too, but not for insider trading. The live stream ironically saved him from that. He was barred for causing failures of supervision. The twist? 6 months into his probation job at a co-working space, he sent me a LinkedIn message. You destroyed my family. I replied with a screenshot of the CCO's LOL and a link to the whistleblower program. My award paid for law school. He wasn't wrong that I destroyed something, but it wasn't his family. It was a system that thought compliance was a vibe. The story 8. I run the soundboard at our old community theater. The place with mismatched seats and a leaky roof we patch with duct tape and prayer. The Montforts, banking money, country club manners, adopted us as their pet charity. Their daughter, Harper, was our artistic chair, which meant Instagram shots in the front row and invoices for floral arrangements taller than the cast. Every gala was a pageant of sparkle and self-congratulation. We smiled and took their checks because lights don't run on high ideals. This year, Harper pitched a donor wall reveal with a giant LED screen supposed to scroll the names of everyone who'd given. She insisted we run it live, pulling from the foundation's database for transparency. I didn't like the sound of that. Live feeds always break. But the Montforts brought in their own AV team and told me to just push the fader. I set levels and watched from the wings. Halfway through the program, the screen glitched and flashed a JSON dump, raw data. The room tittered. Then people started reading. The donor list included invoices. Consulting, $85,000. Event styling, $42,000. Transportation, $19,000. Vendors' addresses matched the Montfort's vacation rental LLCs. Instead of donors, we were paying their shell companies. A hush spread that felt like theater. Everyone breathes in at once. A woman near the back stood up and introduced herself into a hot mic. Hi, I'm from the State Charity Bureau. I was invited as a guest. I think I need to ask some questions. The Montforts tried to laugh it off as aggregated vendor data, but donors started pulling out phones. One older man, the type who never claps on beat, leaned into the aisle and said, "You used my memorial gift to rent your own lake house?" His voice cracked on memorial. Within a week, the Bureau froze the Montfort Foundation's accounts. Their bank sent a notice of default on their personal line, which had been collateralized by pledges. The country club suspended their membership pending review. The theater held an emergency meeting with paper cups of coffee and tears. We were bankrupt if the clawbacks hit us. Then Harper's grandmother walked in. No one had seen her at a gala. She'd stopped coming when her husband died, and the family turned philanthropy into a brand. She wrote a check on the spot that covered our season. True giving doesn't need a logo, she said, and asked me if the donor wall could be painted by the kids in our after-school program instead. The twist? The grandmother filed a civil suit against her own son and granddaughter to dissolve the family foundation and return any assets mishandled. She replaced Harper as trustee, with me and the janitor as co-signers on expenses over $500. The Montforts lost their foundation, their face, and eventually their house when the bank accelerated the note. Our new donor wall is kindergarten bright and slightly crooked. It makes people cry in a good way. Story 9. I was the civilian date on a yacht weekend, invited by a friend of a friend who said the host's son, Finn, was fun and chaos. He had the kind of smile that made you forget stuff like sunscreen and boundaries. The boat slept 12. It felt like a floating nightclub with a mortgage. Finn bragged that his family had solved taxes. Monaco address, Dubai holding, Wyoming trusts. He said this like he was sharing a cocktail recipe. His friends filmed everything for a private Snapchat story called Sons of Evasion. I watched him do an unboxing of a watch he won at his dad's casino, then joke about deducting the fuel under research. I wasn't there to police anyone. I was there because I'd been divorced a year and wanted to remember how laughing felt. Saturday night, a storm curled in quick. Lightning, sideways rain, the works. The captain wanted to head in. Finn wanted one more cove for content. The bilge alarms started whining. We limped back with half the harbor watching. A patrol boat took our lines, and a customs officer stepped aboard, apologetic, as if entering a cathedral. He scanned the docks and frowned. The boat's flag said Marshall Islands. The cruise contract said Malta. The provisioning invoices were to a Delaware LLC that didn't exist anymore. Finn laughed. It's all vibes, man. The officer didn't laugh. They detained the boat for documentation irregularities. Everyone sobered up fast. I texted my rideshare app from the dock and called a friend. The others dozed on Hermes blankets like toddlers at a sleepover gone wrong. Monday, an article dropped. The Sons of Evasion story had leaked. Screenshots, geotags, jokes about audits. Turns out one of the girls that weekend, not me, had an ex working at the paper's investigations desk. The piece tied the family's casino comps, the yacht's registration, and a pattern of losses at the offshore entity that matched suspicious cash movements. Regulators in 3 countries started comparing notes. Banks hate mess. They called loans. The casino regulator announced a review of promotional winnings. His father's empire was leverage and swagger. Both evaporated. Finn texted me weeks later. Want to grab a drink? Crazy summer, right? I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded the article to a number in my favorites labeled Mom, Audit. She'd taught me 2 things. Use sunscreen and taxes fund schools. The twist? I wasn't a journalist or an informant. I was just someone whose mother had spent 30 years being called the fun police for asking rich men for receipts. When the family went down, Mom sent me a beach selfie and a thumbs up. Content, she wrote. I laughed until I cried. Story 10. I'm an art conservator, the person museums call when a painting looks sick. The Delons loaned us a Modigliani for a blockbuster show. Their son, Theo, was the art world version of a rich kid. MFA in intervention. A studio in a warehouse with more champagne flutes than brushes. He loved to walk through our galleries with a scarf thrown just so and say things like, authenticity is a vibe. His parents were bored royalty. I kept my eyebrows neutral. Before opening night, our humidity sensors pinged at 3 a.m. I drove in, half asleep, to find the Modigliani looking fresh. Too fresh. Varnish doesn't reorganize molecules overnight. Under raking light, the crackler pattern was wrong. The cracks were painted, not formed by time. Under UV, the signatures fluoresced like nightclub teeth. My stomach did a slow turn. A swap. We pulled security footage. At 11:42 p.m., Theo had swanned in with 2 installers wearing legitimate-looking badges. He'd told the guard he wanted to bless the piece for Instagram. They were in and out in 10 minutes. I called the registrar. She called the director. Everyone said words like delicate and family. I said police. The responding detective had the tired face of someone who's seen every trick twice. He took one look and called the feds. The Delons were surprised and devastated, of course. They suggested maybe the swap had happened earlier. Then the lab results came back. The paint contained a patented synthetic binder invented 5 years ago. Our fake was new enough to have social media accounts. The story should have ended with Theo in cuffs and the Modigliani recovered from a storage unit. It didn't. The real twist was the provenance file. Decades earlier, the painting had been exported under dubious papers during sanctions. The Delons advisors had laundered its history with a fake Swiss estate. If we went public, the country of origin could claim it. Civil forfeiture. The family would lose a $100 million asset. That's why Theo had panicked. He'd planned to borrow the original for a private sale in a jurisdiction that didn't ask questions, replace it with a high-end forgery, and then discover the loss after the show closed, blaming us. He didn't count on humidity sensors or a conservator who talks to varnish like it's a skittish cat. We helped the feds set a sting. Theo's buyer arrived with a suitcase and two men who didn't blink. They met in a storage facility that smelled like cardboard and money. I watched from a van, headphones on, heart in my mouth. When the agents moved, the sound cut to chaos. Shouts, a clatter, the dull thud of a priceless frame being handled poorly. They recovered the Modigliani, intact but shaken. Yes, I anthropomorphize. Theo's parents tried to save him with lawyers the size of small buildings. The government added an export violation claim. The family voluntarily surrendered the painting to the claimant nation in a ceremony with diplomats and cameras. Their board seats evaporated. Their foundation hemorrhaged donors. The punchline? On deinstall day, I found a note taped behind our gallery wall, hidden where only a conservator would see, in Theo's hand. What is real, but what we agree to see? I penciled an answer underneath, just for me. Consequence. The next week, the museum hosted a free day with a line around the block. People came to see the empty frame where the loan had hung. They stared longer than they ever do at paintings. The Delons lost everything trying to keep a history they didn't own. We gained a story about telling the truth. Story 11. I was a sous chef at a boutique hotel restaurant where the owner's son, Logan, rebranded us Primitive Luxe. Translation: $1 million on reclaimed wood and a policy that every plate needed a lick of open flame at the pass for drama. The fire suppression over the pass kept popping when he'd goose the burners to shoot sparks for his food vlog. He called it a creativity killer and paid a buddy to fit a hidden shutoff so the hoods wouldn't trigger during service. We'll just flip it back on before inspections, he said, like gravity took appointments. The line hated it. I kept a diary of every near miss. One Saturday, the place was jammed with influencers doing boomerangs of sizzling fat, while Logan narrated into a lav mic. Fire is the original seasoning. A pan flashed. He leaned in for the shot. The shutoff was still off. We killed the burners, hit every extinguisher, evacuated. Damage was mostly smoke and ego. Insurance showed up Monday, polite and curious. They asked for maintenance logs. Logan gave them vibes. Here's what he forgot. His vlog editor auto-uploaded raw clips to a cloud folder with timestamps. The adjuster asked for any footage of the shift. Logan handed them a thumb drive cut to soft jazz. The prep cook, kid barely old enough to rent a car, DM'd me a link to the real folder because he couldn't sleep. In those raws, Logan narrates himself turning the suppression valve to off, joking, "We're not scared." He winks at the camera. He forgets he's mic'd when he says, "If we had to pull the system this often, we'd never get a plate out." Insurance rescinded the policy citing willful non-compliance. The city reviewed our permits and found the covert modification. The fire marshal took it personally. The bank called the note on the hotel because the insurance covenant was breached. Vendors sued. Staff scattered. I gave my diary to OSHA and thought that was the end. The twist landed at the creditors' meeting. Logan's buddy, who installed the shutoff? He was the general contractor on the hotel renovation. Also the silent partner who had guaranteed the construction loan with Logan's dad. As part of discovery, he produced group texts where Logan told him, "Turn it off tonight. I'll flip it back after content." The guarantee triggered. Dad's other properties got vacuumed into the default. The family lost the hotel, then the house, then the lake place. Logan tried to relaunch as a fire-cooking YouTuber in a rented studio. His first video opened with a disclaimer. All safety systems active. In the comments, someone wrote, "Cool. Where were they when your dad still owned a roof?" Story 12. I was the nanny for the Bellwether family during an election year, which meant my job was 40% childcare and 60% corralling a senator's daughter, Celeste, who styled herself as a youth outreach czar. She was 22, operated on Matcha and Audacity, and managed the campaign's Friends and Family card, a black Amex that hummed like a beehive, wristbands to a desert festival, outreach, a rented villa for content strategy, outreach. The finance director complained and got reassigned to voter data hygiene. Celeste ran everything through a WhatsApp group called Sunshine Crew. I wasn't in the chat. The interns were, and they were kids who thought screenshots were a currency. I'd hear snippets while pouring apple juice. Pay the DJ as consulting. They never audit consulting. And I'd hum the Paw Patrol theme louder so the twins wouldn't absorb ethics before phonics. The senator's wife, my boss, kept saying, "She'll learn boundaries. She always does." At a rally, Celeste gave the twins the fun job of handing stickers to donors on the rope line. One little girl grabbed the roving mic and chirped it across the stage like a starling. Celeste leaned down and cooed, "Tell the nice people where we're going after." The kid, thrilled, yelled, "To get ice cream with the dark money card." The crowd laughed. The clip went mega viral because the internet loves a child and a phrase that sounds like a confession. Reporters started asking for receipts. The FEC sent letters. The campaign said it was a smear. Then someone leaked Sunshine Crew. Every invoice, every Venmo memo, every make the memo boring, put printing. It wasn't me. It was an intern facing student loans who'd been stiffed a stipend. He sent the folder to 3 outlets and, for good measure, to the senator's primary opponent. Celeste cried on Instagram Live about cancel culture while wearing a $3,200 jacket billed as digital ad placement. The senator suspended the campaign to focus on family. The party pulled support. Donors filed complaints, some including personal guarantees on loans they'd fronted the campaign. The Bellwether's personal foundation got audited for overlap. Their accountants resigned on LinkedIn. The villa owner sued when the card bounced. The bank moved to attach assets pledged against campaign lines because the finance chair, Dad, had cross-collateralized with the family office. The house went up for sale with the staging art still warm. The twist? The Sunshine Crew archive included texts from the senator's wife, the one who'd smiled through it, directing reimbursements to her own branding consultancy. She quietly turned state's witness in exchange for immunity and a requirement to teach campaign finance compliance webinars for 2 years. The last day I worked for them, I buckled the twins into my used Prius. One asked, "Are we still getting ice cream?" We did. I paid. The cone dripped on my thrifted jeans. It felt like the only clean thing in the whole mess. A story 13. I'm the librarian in a high desert town where water isn't just life. It's politics. The Corcorans owned the vineyard and the polo field and anything that could be seen from a drone. Their son, Beckett, came back from grad school with a hat that said, "Water is a mindset," and an LLC that promised regenerative aquifer synergy. Then the creek that had run behind our elementary school since the WPA days started showing up in his Instagram, flowing through a new slate-bottomed wildlife corridor on their land that looked like an infinity pool for deer. I file things for a living. Water rights are files. When the creek got skinny and the school's garden died, I pulled the ditch company minutes. There it was, an emergency transfer recorded at 4:42 p.m. on a holiday Friday, moving historical rights from a defunct ranch to the Corcorans for beneficial use. The signatures were scanned and oddly crisp. The notary's commission had expired 2 months earlier. I asked the clerk for the original. She said it must be in transit. Our mayor, who plays poker with Beckett's dad, told me to let the grown-ups handle it. I filed a records request. Beckett posted a drone shot with a caption, "Routing history." The ranch that supposedly had the transferable rights? The town donated it to the county in the 1970s with a deed restriction. Water must remain attached to public land. I scanned the deed and brought it to the county meeting. They punted to the state engineer. Meanwhile, a sinkhole opened on the old ranch road, groundwater dropping. The school's cafeteria served bottled water. Moms started showing up at meetings in dusty sneakers. The state engineer arrived with a cardboard tube of maps. He unrolled ours and tapped the deed restriction with a fingernail. "If there was a transfer," he said, "it's void." Beckett's lawyers argued about augmentation packages and temporary diversions. The state auditor found something cleaner. Invoices from Beckett's LLC billed to the Corcoran Family Trust for ecosystem restoration, which turned out to be bulldozers and a private culvert. They'd been refunding themselves as conservationists while moving water off public land. The Attorney General filed an action to unwind the transfer and assess penalties measured in acre-feet multiplied by days. Banks love vineyards. They do not love regulatory fines that compound like yeast. The line of credit collapsed. The vines went to auction. The polo field went to weeds. The twist sits in our children's section now. The deed of gift for that old ranch, donated by a Corcoran grandmother long fed up with the men in her family, had a reversion clause I'd missed the first read. If any Corcoran entity ever tried to detach water from the land, the family's remaining easements to cross the property were extinguished. They can't even drive to the graves of the horses they bragged about. Beckett moved to a city where water comes from a tap and posted about starting over. The creek came back to the schoolyard. The kids named the first frog they saw Klaus. Story 14. I was the backup keeper for a second division football club owned by a textile dynasty. Their heir, Milo, bought us the way people buy distressed denim, to wear the fray as fashion. He installed DJ booths in the players' lounge and a cryo chamber that never worked. He also installed a performance bonus structure that violated league caps by a mile, laundering extra pay as media consulting through a marketing agency his cousin ran out of a loft. We all knew. Winning paid rent. The agency paid for everything else. Then Milo decided to juice brand engagement with a reality series on a streaming platform. Cameras in the locker room, cameras in the physio, cameras in your face at breakfast. The producers wanted drama, so they followed our captain's contract saga like it was a romance. One night, after a derby loss, the captain told Milo to stop filming negotiations. Milo went live anyway. He opened his laptop and flashed a spreadsheet to prove total comp was fair. You could see the off-books consulting column clear as the sponsor on our kit. Clips hit the app. The league compliance inbox exploded. Milo claimed it was mock data. The marketing cousin posted a story of himself on holiday with a caption, "No comment," and a view of a balcony blindly reflecting his laptop screen. Same spreadsheet, new tab, agent kickbacks. The league launched an investigation. Our rivals filed complaints with relish. The board tried to ring-fence it as a rogue project, but the streaming deal had required Milo to personally guarantee production costs with club assets as collateral. When the league froze distributions, the bank seized the training ground to satisfy the guarantee. Practices got moved to a municipal pitch with goose poop landmines. The squad's contracts had relegation clauses triggered by governing body sanction. Half the dressing room walked on freeze. I thought that was the bottom. Then came the twist. During the sanctions hearing, our equipment manager, quiet man, 2 kids, stood and asked to speak. He had a letter from immigration granting him leave to remain based on his indispensable role at a professional club. Without a club, his status evaporated. He'd kept his head down through Milo's parties and posturing. He'd taped our ankles and stitched our hearts. Milo looked at the cameras for help and found none. He stood, cleared his throat, and said into a dead room, "Sanction me, not them. Strip the license from my holding company. Let the supporters' trust take the badge." The league shrugged. Rules were rules, but supporters flooded in with a plan. They created a Phoenix club overnight using the only asset left unencumbered, our name, which a fan had trademarked years ago, just in case. I made my first start in front of 2,000 people holding hand-painted signs. The dynasty sold their mills to cover the guarantees. Milo filmed one last scene. Him handing the fan who owned the trademark a handwritten bill of sale for £1. He cried. We won 1-0 on a muddy pitch. I kept a clean sheet, and for the first time, the cameras weren't for him. They were for us. Story 15. I'm a pattern cutter. Scissors, chalk, quiet miracles. The Danes ran a legacy fashion house built on tasteful coats and family myth. Their daughter, Aurelia, took over as creative after 3 semesters in Paris and a podcast. She launched a community capsule that invited young designers to submit sketches for mentorship consideration. The terms buried in the portal were a rights grab. Anything uploaded could be explored by the house without further obligation. We grumbled. Kids hit submit anyway. One Tuesday, a submission came across my table that made me sit up. A modular trench with detachable sleeves that became a bag with a hidden seam I'd never seen. The sketch belonged to a designer named Naya from Detroit. She'd annotated with notes like, "Visible mending as status," which was poetry to me. I took it to my boss. He frowned and said, "Archive it." 2 months later, Aurelia unveiled the runway lineup. There it was, Naya's trench, tweaked and glossed, walking on a model with cheekbones like Spite. Aurelia said into the bank of microphones, "This is my homage to craft." The comments got loud fast. Naya posted her submission receipt. Fashion Twitter did forensic overlays. The house's lawyers sent Naya a letter about defamatory statements. They sent me a talking point. Inspiration is iterative. The twist didn't come from Twitter. It came from the projector. Our venue used a seamless LED wall for mood video. Aurelia wanted a live collage of her process. Her junior art director, exhausted and underpaid, dragged the wrong folder at the last minute. The wall flashed a grid of Photoshop files with visible layer names. Naya bag seam final, Naya trench alt, Naya stitch tut MP4. The crowd inhaled like a single lung. A blogger in the front row whispered, "Oh no." Investors bolted. The conglomerate that owned 40% of the house triggered a morality clause and yanked financing. The Danes had leveraged their townhouse to buy back shares. The bank accelerated. Aurelia tried a live apology, crying softly about the gray area of inspiration, while the projector, bless it, idled on a thumbnail of a Google Drive window titled Contest Submissions. I quit that night and called Naya. She answered from a laundromat, shocked and furious. I offered something no one else could, the internal pattern files showing dates and edits. Proof that her geometry was the skeleton of Aurelia's vision. We met in a coffee shop with my portable scanner and a stack of NDAs I ignored. Naya filed suit. She also launched a crowdfunding campaign with rewards like your initials hidden in a seam. It blew up. The house settled quietly, then noisily when the court ordered the agreement unsealed due to investor claims. The Danes sold their townhouse. Aurelia started a newsletter about accountability aesthetics. The old ateliers were shuttered, but two of us took our tables and moved into a storefront with Naya. We cut cloth while she fit clients who cried when they saw themselves understood in a mirror. On opening night, someone asked what the brand was called. Naya looked at the sign I'd chalked on the window. Claws and seam, she said. Outside it rained and people came in anyway. The richest girl in the room was the one who paid us with honesty. The family who taught me how to notch a collar lost everything trying to steal what couldn't be bought. Story 16. I was a senior QA at a glossy smart home startup that sold itself as privacy-first luxury automation. Translation: cameras in every marble corner feeding a cloud we pinky swore was secure. The founder's son, Pierce, wore the CTO title like a varsity jacket. He loved God Mode, an internal dashboard that let you hop into any customer's house to demo features during sales calls. It was supposed to be locked behind 2 approvals and a hardware token. Pierce decided approvals were friction and wrote a backdoor for his demo account so he could wow VCs with live looks. I filed tickets. I got a smiley face and ship it. The week we launched our flagship in a billionaire tower, Pierce threw a rooftop party where he invited influencers to control the skyline. He put God Mode on a big screen, lights blinking across penthouses like a cardiogram. Someone yelled, "Can you show us famous people's places?" He grinned and typed, "Only if they opted in." He hit enter. A dozen front doors pinged. A nanny yelled up at a ceiling speaker. A pool cover retracted in a gust of wind. I killed his session from my laptop. He reconnected, slurring about permissionless innovation. The next morning, my inbox was a crime scene. A customer's indoor camera feed had gone viral because one of the influencers had mirrored the display to their followers. The clip showed a teenage kid in a wheelchair brushing his teeth. His mom was the one who'd insisted on our system for accessibility, not surveillance. She posted a thread with receipts. Regulators came like a thunderstorm. The FTC asked about the backdoor. Pierce called it a feature in pilot. Our chief counsel squeezed my elbow so hard I had bruises and said, "We'll handle." Plaintiffs' lawyers filed a class action before lunch. The tower's condo board froze our contract and called the press. A state AG subpoena landed with a thud. How many times had staff accessed feeds without consent? Our logs were all over the place because Pierce had turned off verbose logging to save disk. The board tried to firewall him by transitioning him to an advisory role. Then the kicker. God Mode left an audit trail in our third-party telemetry tool we didn't control. Their support rep emailed the AG a CSV after we dawdled. It showed Pierce's account hopping into a celebrity's nursery at 2:17 a.m. to prove he could change the lullaby. Under oath, he said he didn't watch. The CSV showed he toggled the zoom. Insurance balked. Intentional acts exclusion. Our Series C investor exercised a clawback and seized IP. But the leanest part of the company was me and 3 engineers who still believed in door sensors. The founder had pledged his house as collateral. The bank called. The founder's wife stood in our server room and sobbed while we labeled drives for evidence. The twist? The wheelchair kid's mom didn't just sue us. She worked in a state capitol. The privacy bill she'd been fighting to pass for years died in committee twice. She stapled our screenshots to it and named the Pierce Clause, personal liability for executives who bypass safeguards. It passed in a month. Pierce can't hold an officer role in our state for 10 years. His family's house, our collateral, went at auction to a nurse who recognized it from the viral video. She hung heavy drapes first thing. Story 17. I was a groom for the Langford stables, braiding manes at 4 a.m., living on liniment and Cheerios. Their daughter, Sailor, was the golden child of the hunter ring. She never walked, she sparkled. Her gelding, Atlas, could find 8 perfect distances blindfolded. Then the wind stopped. He got nappy, ears pinning, refusing at the first oxer. Sailor threw a crop and called him lazy. The trainer whispered for patience. Sailor demanded a program. The new program came in brown glass bottles wrapped in vet tape. The barn vet, a man with a Rolex and soft hands, called them supplements. They were more like chemistry. "It's legal out of competition," he would say, then time injections like prayers. I kept a diary. Doses, temps, refusals. I wrote down when Atlas's eyes got too bright, when his gums went pale. At a big show, the steward arrived with a random test slip. Sailor smiled, led Atlas away, and came back with a different horse in the warm-up. Same blaze, wider sock. The steward's eyebrow twitched. Later, alone in the tack room, I watched Sailor pour 2 vials into a water bottle, then dump it into Atlas's feed. He looked at me. I still dream about that look. I called the show hotline and used a fake name. Check the feed tub. They pulled the sample. Atlas peed in a cup. The steward thanked me without knowing who I was. 2 days later, the lab called. The press release broke like a thunderclap. Positives for a banned stimulant and a sedative. Sailor went live on Instagram crying about sabotage. Her mother threatened lawsuits. The governing body suspended her pending a hearing. That night, Atlas colicked. I sat on the rubber matting while he sweated and pawed and tried to lie down. The Rolex vet pumped him with fluids and said he'd be fine. He wasn't. At dawn, the trailer doors closed on a blue tarp. The barn was quiet like a church after a wedding. Sailor didn't come to say goodbye. Insurance sent an investigator because the policy on Atlas was 7 figures. He took pictures of the feed tub, my diary, the vet's inventory. He found 2 sets of labels in the trash like stage props. One said vitamin E, underneath, clenbuterol. The company denied the claim and reported the vet to the state board. The hearing went public. So did texts where Sailor demanded more Brave juice before a derby. Sponsors dropped the Langfords. The IRS looked at sponsorship fees. Turns out their foundation bought the horses and wrote them off as therapy animals. The twist walked into the hearing in mud boots. The previous groom, who'd left after Sailor threw a brush at her head. She had screenshots of Sailor's messages telling her to swap horses for the steward. This wasn't the first time. The governing body not only banned Sailor for life, they banned her mother from owning horses competing under their rules. The farm bled money without ribbons and buyers. Fences sagged. The polo field turned to weeds. Atlas is buried under the oak. I planted clover there after I quit. It came up thick, like something forgiving the ground. Story 18. I'm a line service tech at a small airport. The guy in ear pro waving wands and smelling Jet A. The Harrows own a charter company with shiny light jets and a son, Chase, who treated the ramp like a catwalk. He passed his multi and his type rating in record time with an examiner. Everyone joked was Santa. Always generous. Chase live-streamed cockpit shots to followers with captions like, "Born to rotate." The chief pilot muttered about CRM and prayed to the JEP gods. One August afternoon, a medevac flight called 3 miles final. Tower cleared them to land. Chase, VFR in the pattern, decided to do a 360 for content. He overshot, lined up on the wrong runway, then rolled through the hold short line just as the medevac touched down. The crew jerked off, tires smoking, and missed Chase by a Bible's thickness. The whole thing was on the airport's ADS-B feed and a passenger's TikTok. The medevac pilot taxied by and saluted with one finger. The feds arrived before the rubber cooled. Chase gave them swagger and a lawyer. The chief pilot produced training records with more holes than a colander. The examiner who'd signed Chase's type rating? Under investigation already. A rumor became a report. Bribes in the form of consulting fees paid by the Harrow family office. The FAA pulled the examiner's designation and reopened every check ride he'd touched. They started with Chase. The Harrows thought they'd isolate the damage. Then, maintenance logs surfaced showing deferred squawks relabeled as cosmetic. Pressurization warnings treated like check engine lights. Insurance carriers love clauses. They found the one that lets them rescind for material misrepresentation. The charter certificate was suspended pending a review. Planes can't fly without a certificate. Planes on loans don't like sitting. The bank sent a man with polite shoes and a checklist. Here's the twist. Buried in the cockpit GoPro Chase used for content was a segment no one noticed until discovery. The camera kept rolling after he set it down post-incident. You can hear his father on speakerphone coaching him to tell investigators it was ATC confusion. You can hear the chief pilot say quietly, "You crossed an active because you were filming." You can hear Chase ask, "Will TikTok cooperate if they subpoena me?" That question did what runway incursions almost didn't. It made the FAA add reckless to the charge. The U.S. attorney added obstruction. The charter company's certificate was revoked. The Harrows tried to pivot to asset management and lease the jets to someone else. The planes went dark one by one, ferried away by pilots who didn't talk. I still wave wands, but every time a medevac calls 3 mile final, my hands shake a little. Chase's last post before his account vanished was a close-up of his headset with the mic cut off. The caption said, "Silence is underrated." For once, he wasn't wrong.